On January 24th, the Columbia Board of Realtors hosted a candidates forum for the upcoming Columbia municipal election. First Ward City Council candidate Pat Fowler was unable to attend due to work obligations. These are her answers to the slate of questions presented at that forum. Pat Fowler recognizes the advantages inherent in answering these questions nearly a week later and in a controlled environment, but believes it is important she answers these questions. All right, so what is your reaction to the controversy surrounding the diversity breakfast that took place last week?
So the first thing that I realized and I remember reading was there were 2 complaints from parents, which I assume the superintendent handled and spoke with those parents. What is telling, though, is the amount of resources that the state, the Attorney General, and the governor are bringing to this situation, which tells me they have the capacity to attend to so many other problems that Missouri experiences with the same level of intensity. And so I would like all of us to expect more of them rather than leaning into what is a larger, they're making a bigger deal out of what was 2 parental complaints.
All right, so this next question has to do with affordable housing, and it is, how can we create additional housing in Columbia?
So I understand the intent of the question, which is affordable housing, but we have a lot of housing in Columbia. And in the First Ward, it's recently been shown in some of the work the Planning and Zoning Commission is doing that we have 1,100 vacant units in the First Ward. So rather than talking about bringing more housing, how about we return the housing we already have into use so that our families can have places to live? In order to do that, we have to identify who owns it, and then either reach out through a not-for-profit to ask them, what is the reason why this house is sitting vacant, and to see if we can't coax those back into the market. But we also have a problem with the condition of some of our housing in the First Ward, and it is a legitimate power of the city to regulate and hold to a certain standard the conditions in our rental housing. And I think it's time we look more closely at that as well.
All right, this question had a prelude about how it has to do with the roll cart system that's going to be implemented in Columbia. And the question is, how would you change the current trash and recycling service should it be privatized?
So I don't believe it should be privatized. I think we have hardworking employers who are doing the right thing. But how we should change our existing service is we should bring the workers together and ask them, what do you observe as the difficulties that our community faces, particularly our seniors and persons with disabilities, so that before we design a new system, we take that into consideration. Our employees have the wisdom to help us design a system that works, not only for them and their families, because they're also trash customers, but also for the rest of us.
If we need to have a police department that is fully staffed, how do we go about doing that? If the solution is to pay the police officers more, will you as a council person be okay with putting that to vote again? If not, what do we pay less for to be able to pay police officers more?
I'm glad that that question was asked because we have agreed to pay our police officers more. I'm not sure which month it was in, but this past fall, we approved an immediate pay increase so that all officers starting and continuing have at least a $50,000 salary plus the benefit package that they have under their collective bargaining agreement. So as far as getting our police department fully staffed, let's look at the other issues surrounding the care of our community and where we're falling short. We ask our police to handle many situations that are beyond their training and beyond their control, including mental health crises. So where are the folks who can work on mental health issues and other under-resourced issues for our family that would take away the necessity to call the police to begin with? I think long-term we've been unfair to our police by expecting them to handle every situation, even when it is outside of their training and their experience. So let's look at it becoming a community that has more resources, which again would make our police officers' job more professionally rewarding and also provide the much needed services for our families.
How do we create a neighborhood that cares for each other?
So I think this is an important question, particularly in light of the short-term rental conversation we're about to have again. And that is, all of us live in neighborhoods because we like having neighbors. And we like building that relationship with our neighbors. So if we want to give every neighborhood the chance that I already have in my neighborhood, I am surrounded by neighbors I care about and they care about me. And we regularly watch out for each other. But in order to do that, we have to have regular neighbors. So let's get our houses occupied again so that we are fully occupied. And let's also be very careful and strategic about where we allow short-term rentals, because that means you won't have a neighbor next door to you if that property is used as a short-term rental.
Should the City Council have approved the Fusus camera system in November?
No. And if we want to approve a software system that provides that kind of assistance to the police department, we have to have a carefully crafted and thoughtful policy in place ahead of time. So after trying unsuccessfully multiple times to get a policy in place before that came before council for a vote, I voted no, and I also voted for us to advance a model policy as discussed by Sharon Goway-Jones at the hearing. Sharon's a lawyer, by the way, and she had researched it, and she brought it to our attention. And we are supposed to be seeing that ordinance come back to us, hopefully soon. I understand that the police want that software tool as a way to help them solve crime, but one thing we need to do ahead of time is to make sure we know what kinds of crime we're trying to solve. We need the data as to where calls for service are in our city. We need to know what kinds of calls for service were happening or that are occurring, and whether or not having a software system that links cameras is going to address that. Otherwise, it seems like a really nice piece of technology, but not one that's going to have an impact on the day-to-day safety and quality of life in our community.
In your eyes, what is the role of a city council person?
So city council have three primary responsibilities. We supervise the city manager, who then supervises the work of city staff. We approve the annual budget and subsequently allocations of funding during the year. And we either approve or do not approve policies that are brought forward to us in the form of either ordinances or resolutions. Beyond that, we are limited in what we can do, sadly, because I talk to a lot of residents from the First Ward who would like to know if I can fix any particular problem they're having with city staff. What I do instead, because I'm not permitted under the charter to call a city staff person and ask them to resolve a problem on behalf of one of our residents, is that I problem solve with our residents about how has this gone so far? What information do you have? Who might you talk to next? And then if we have gone as far as we can go on that path of connecting that person to the right person, I certainly know the departments and what their functions are, then I can take information to the city manager, information he can act upon. And in order to do that, he needs to know which city employee was the resident talking to, what was the problem that was presented to them, what was the solution that was offered, why does that not work, and most importantly, why is all of this important to our residents? That's what I believe the function is of the city council member.
All right. Do you think there should be stricter residency requirements for city council candidates?
Boy, that's a really interesting one. And so let me just go straight at that, because I know there's a lot of back channel conversation about the fact that I work outside of the city. I live in my house on North 6th Street, and I believe that we have appropriate policies in place that specify that you need to live in the ward in which you either are running for office or you represent. The fact that members of our community work outside of the city, it would seem unfair of us to require them to work in the city, because that would take out folks that drive to Jefferson City every day for their jobs to work in state government. Folks that drive to Moberly, perhaps they have an agricultural focus to their work, and there's some agricultural places up there. Folks that drive to Sedalia if they need to. And so I find all this interesting. I think instead what we should talk about, where I'm concerned, is if you don't agree how I voted on a particular matter, let's talk about that, rather than suggesting that I don't live in Columbia just because I don't work in Columbia.
What has been the most rewarding part about being on city council to you?
It's been the ability to listen to people's experiences, to hear their struggles, and to figure out how we can do something to change that. When the city staff bring forward a policy that our residents tell us would inflict harm on our community, to come and join together with them and to articulate why this is a bad idea, and then hopefully to vote down that policy. That has been the most rewarding. Now, going forward, we have to first examine where we have inequities in our community so that we can then prepare to make our community more equitable. And I realize that it seems like we voted no on a lot of things during my first term, but you have to prepare the conversation for what would benefit more of our families, more of our community members, more of our Black and brown community members who have been left behind time and time again.
How do you respond to people who disagree with your votes?
I listen. I ask them to tell me their concerns. I ask them to tell me, why is that important to you? And what importance does that have to the rest of the community? I've made some mistakes as a council member. I have 2 or 3 votes I wish I could reverse, including I voted yes to go ahead and change the underlying ordinance for the Citizens Police Review Board because of the urging of city staff and the city attorney that we had no other options regarding implementing the changes from Senate Bill 26. I think I made a mistake. I should have voted no, and I should have pushed harder for the city to challenge that law and its impact on the Citizens Police Review Board.
Right. Do you consider yourself to be persuadable?
Oh, absolutely. That's one of the reasons why I work so hard from Thursday to Monday to call people I know that are directly affected by the policy that is evident inside the ordinance or the resolution that we're asked to vote on. Some of them are not controversial, they're not difficult decisions to make, but others have a direct impact on an adjoining property owner, a neighbor, a neighborhood. And so I start with, tell me what I need to know to make better decisions. I rarely start with my own opinion. And when I vote, I am voting for what the neighborhood or the person most directly affected, what that impact has on them. I think the persuadable part always has to be, why is this important to the community at large, or why is this important to a certain group of people in our community, and how are they going to live with the consequences of that? And I am always persuadable.
All right, so now for your closing statement, just take 1 or 2 minutes to give us a quick pitch for why you're running for city council and why you should be elected to represent the first ward.
So we have a lot of work still to be done in the first ward, and I was grateful to have the opportunity for the first 3 years, although my term is just a little bit shortened because of the pandemic. But the reason why I'm running for a second term is I believed Mayor Treese when he said the pandemic will expose every inequity in our community. And it has. And we still have work to do to address those. The ARPA funds, which is a significant sum of money, will be voted on and distributed during the next 3 years. And I want to be there to help shepherd that money to those families and those individuals who were disproportionately impacted by the pandemic or who have lived for years with inequity within our community. That's what that money is for. So in many ways, this election is about the ARPA funds. And I want to stand with our community to make sure that those funds are spent in the way that addresses both years of neglect in our community and also addresses those who were most disproportionately impacted by the pandemic.